There are certain sounds you recognize instantly. A familiar voice calling your name from another room. A sudden, sharp scream piercing the quiet of the night. A warning shouted just before an accident. These sounds have meaning, context. They are part of our shared language of survival and connection. This story, however, is about a sound that no one could ever describe, but everyone who heard it understood its terrible finality. Before we dive into the silence this sound leaves behind, a quick word. If you enjoy slow-burn, deeply unsettling horror stories that linger long after they're over, do me a favor and subscribe to the channel right now. Because once you know this particular sound exists, a part of you will start listening for it everywhere. It was never loud. That's the first thing everyone who heard it agreed on. It wasn't a bang, not a crash, not a boom. It wasn't violent or aggressive, it was just a sound. A sound that didn't belong to anything in the known world. It had no source, no echo, no physical properties you could measure. People reported hearing it in vastly different places under completely different circumstances. A student studying late in a silent library. A trucker driving down a desolate highway in the pre-dawn hours. A young mother rocking her baby to sleep. The one constant was this: they were always alone when they heard it. And it always came right before everything changed, irrevocably. It wasn't the sound itself that was terrifying. It was the absolute, crushing certainty that followed in its wake. At first, these reports were isolated, dismissed as oddities, tricks of the mind, or perhaps the onset of some auditory hallucination. But as more stories trickled in from disparate corners of the globe, a disturbing pattern began to emerge. The sound never repeated itself for the same person. You only heard it once. But the aftermath, the change it wrought in the individual, was chillingly identical every single time. People who heard it simply stopped. They stopped making plans for the future. They stopped asking questions about the world. Their curiosity, their ambition, their drive, it all just evaporated. Some of them stopped speaking entirely, retreating into a profound, unreachable silence. Others went to the opposite extreme, becoming compulsively talkative, filling every possible moment with noise, chatter, anything to keep the memory of that perfect, awful silence at bay. They were desperate to fill the void the sound had left behind, a void that wasn't empty, but was filled with a single, unshakable piece of knowledge. Naturally, as the phenomenon became more widely whispered about, someone tried to capture it. A team of paranormal investigators, or maybe they were just audio engineers with a morbid curiosity, set out to record the sound. They equipped a supposed hotspot with the most sensitive microphones money could buy. For weeks, they recorded, cataloging every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the refrigerator, every distant siren. The tapes picked up nothing out of the ordinary. Hours and hours of static, ambient room tone, the mundane soundtrack of an empty house. The project was deemed a failure. But then, one of the engineers was reviewing the tapes late one night, headphones on, zoning out to the white noise. Suddenly, he froze. He ripped the headphones off, his face pale. His colleagues rushed over, asking what was wrong. He couldn't describe it. He just pointed a trembling finger at the recording equipment. They played the section back again and again, nothing. Just the same flat hiss of background noise. The engineer insisted. He didn't hear the sound on the recording. That wasn't the problem. The problem was, while listening to the playback, he had recognized it. And somehow, that was infinitely worse than hearing it for the first time. The recording hadn't captured the sound, but it had somehow served as a conduit for it. So, what does it mean? What is this sound that can't be recorded, can't be described, yet can change a person so fundamentally? The immediate, almost primal assumption is that it's a premonition of death. A final warning. The bell tolling for you and you alone. But those who studied the cases, who spoke to the friends and families of those affected, came to realize that was a crude, simplistic interpretation. The truth was quieter and far more insidious. The sound didn't mean death, the sound meant finality. It wasn't about the act of dying. It was about the state of being done. It was the knowledge delivered directly into your consciousness that there would be no more new moments. No more firsts, no more surprises. Everything that happened from that point forward would just be motion, an echo of a life already lived. You would continue to walk, to eat, to sleep. But you were no longer a participant. You were just an artifact moving through a world that had already moved past you. There was one man, an academic who had dedicated his life to studying anomalous phenomena, who decided he wouldn't be a passive victim. He would meet it on his own terms. He decided to wait for it. He set up a vigil in his secluded home office, determined to stay awake, alert, and listening. He surrounded himself with books, with coffee, with stimulants, fighting off sleep, his ears straining for any deviation from the norm. Days passed. Then a week. The silence of his house was absolute, broken only by the ticking of a grandfather clock and his own ragged breathing. Nothing happened. He started to think the whole thing was a myth, a modern folktale born of anxiety. Then, one night, well into his second week of watching, he was in the middle of a completely mundane act. He was stirring sugar into his tea. The spoon clinked against the porcelain. His eyes were half closed with fatigue. And in that moment, so normal and unremarkable that it almost went unnoticed, he heard it. And a strange thing happened. He didn't panic. He didn't feel dread. He felt an immense wave of relief wash over him. He immediately relaxed, a deep sigh escaping his lips. He set the teacup down, because now he knew. The waiting was over. The people who heard the sound didn't vanish in a puff of smoke. They didn't drop dead on the spot. They kept living, at least in a technical sense. They went to their jobs. They had conversations with their loved ones. They paid their bills. But anyone who encountered them after the event said the same thing. Something was gone. It wasn't fear exactly. In fact, many of them seemed strangely fearless, unconcerned with risks or consequences. What was missing was possibility. The spark of potential that exists in every living thing, the unwritten pages of their future. It was gone. When you looked into their eyes, you saw a placid emptiness. It was like talking to a recording, a perfect imitation of a person who was no longer there. A friend of one victim put it best. It felt like I was talking to someone who had already finished their story and was just waiting for everyone else to catch up. They weren't ghosts, they were postscripts. And now we come to the final, most unsettling part of this story. Why are you hearing it now? You see, the sound doesn't travel through the air. It doesn't need volume or frequency to propagate. It doesn't obey the laws of physics as we know them. It spreads in a much more intimate way. It spreads through stories, through description, through recognition. It plants a seed not in your ears, but in your mind. If this story has made you feel uncomfortable, if you feel a strange sense of unease settling over you, it's not because of the words you've just heard. It's because a part of your mind is now aware of the concept. It's because a part of you is now subconsciously waiting for it. You've been told about a silence that means something. And now, in every quiet moment, a small part of you will be listening for it. The idea has been planted. And ideas, as we know, are impossible to unthink. Some sounds don't announce the end. They simply confirm that it has already happened. They don't open a door to the unknown. They quietly close the one behind you forever. If this story managed to get under your skin and stay with you, please do like the video. It lets me know that this kind of deeper psychological horror is something you want more of. And make sure you're subscribed to When Lights Out with notifications turned on. We have many more stories to share, many more silences to explore. Thanks for listening.